This video is sponsored by Dungeons & Lasers 5 Deus Slayer, coming to Kickstarter soon. In this video, I'm going to give you my first impressions of the Speedpaint 2.0 range from the Army Painter. And if you don't feel like watching the entire video, here are my quick thoughts. The pros. Reactivation is almost completely gone, and from what I can tell, completely gone after a 2-hour drying time. The price is still as low as ever, about half the price of Citadel contrast paints, and I really like a lot of the new colors, especially the Speedpaint metallics. The cons. The bottle design is kind of bad, and a lot of the tips come clogged by default. The smell is also pretty strong for scent-sensitive individuals like myself, and you also can't blend with them like you used to be able to with the original range of speed paints. Because, as I mentioned, reactivation is pretty much gone now, and that was what allowed for the sort of dynamic blending that I used to use these things for. And that's pretty much it. I'm going to be using this video to go into more detail on each of these subjects. But before we go any further, let's get into the disclosure zone. So full disclosure, this was a product that I was paid to work on as a consultant. Last year, I was paid to test these paints, come up with some new colors that I thought would complement the range. And if you want the full details on that, you can click up here for a video that explains the full story of my relationship with Army Painter. And that's why I'm calling this video my first impressions on Speedpaint 2.0, not a review, because of that bias. But with that said, this is actually my first time trying out the production versions of these paints. I only used prototypes before with not the complete new formula, so I am just as curious as you are how these things are going to actually perform. A few weeks ago, Army Painter sent me this box in the mail, and it's called the Speedpaint Mega Set 2.0. It comes with 50 bottles of paint, technically 49 bottles of paint, as one of those bottles of paint is Speedpaint Medium, which I am thankful they included in this set. And this will be a somewhat incomplete first impressions video, as this is not even close to the full range of paints in this series. This set only includes 3 of the new metallics, and doesn't include any of the paints that me or the guys over at Watch It and Paint It helped design. There are a total of 90 different colors of speed paint that will be released soon in individual bottles and in various little sets, and this set is just 50 of those colors. So this box just includes a fraction of the full range, and I hope to do a longer review and full color comparison once I have all of the different speed paints in hand. So today we're just going to be testing out the paint, talking about how they feel to use, what the reactivation situation is now, and if I actually see myself using these paints in the future or not. So first things first, the new standard brush they included with this set is a little bit strange. You can see here a comparison of the old brush, the white one, to the new brush, the red one. The new one is significantly smaller, and I'm not sure why they did this. I'm sure they have a reason, but personally I find using a larger brush works better with these paints. But anyway, that's just a small nitpick. Let's take a look at the paints. And today we're going to be testing these paints out on a large bore person from the sponsor of today's video, Dungeons & Lasers 5, the world of Deus Slayer. I've been friendly with Dungeons & Lasers for some time now. They send me lots of sample products to test out, and I'm generally a big fan of their plastic kits. They have made some great modular terrain, dungeon tiles, and miniatures in the past, and this is their first foray into making their very own 5th edition compatible campaign setting with all the minis and terrain you could ever want to complement it. This is another one of those big Kickstarter campaigns where you get just a ton of miniatures for a very low price. And just taking a quick look at what's on offer, I would say at least 80% of these would fit great into my home campaign setting of Howl City with little to no changes involved. But not only are these cheap minis with 5th edition stats, they are also extremely high quality minis. These are actual polystyrene plastic sprues that are made in-house in Poland at the Dungeons & Lasers headquarters. Some of these sprues are even multi-part figures with various options, and I'm just always here for that. They sent me a sample pack of these figures, and they were easy to build. The plastic quality was really nice and detailed, and they've got all the excellent perks you would expect from Dungeons & Lasers, including early bird pledges, returning backer rewards, as well as the option to add on a lot of their classic products if you don't have those as well. So if you don't want to miss out, go to deuslayer.com/preview page today and click the Notify on Launch button to be notified on the 11th of April when this Kickstarter goes live. And that concludes our ad segment for today. Let's get back to the video. I started by painting the armor panels in red, as that was one of the colors that really tended to reactivate a lot with the original paints. And okay, so here's my first piece of criticism for these paints. The bottles are just not built for this sort of paint formulation, and when I first opened them, the majority of the paints were clogged and full of excess air pressure, leading to this happening. And this is an easy thing to fix. You just take a needle or sharp pointy thing and unclog the nozzle, but it still isn't ideal, and I thought I would mention it. I've also found throughout using these that a few of them even get reclogged pretty easily, and you have to keep a little pin on hand to unclog them whenever you want to use them. But aside from those issues with the bottles, the actual paint seems pretty good to me. The consistency is pretty close to what I remember the old Speedpaints working like, only they dry much faster. The paints dry in just a few minutes now from what I can see, and they don't reactivate much at all after this initial drying time. After 10 minutes of painting this red on the armor plates, I was able to paint a pure white on top of the red paint pretty easily after just a few minutes, with very little bleed through. And after a few hours, you can just wipe a damp brush all over the thing, and it doesn't seem to reactivate at all from what I can see. The next thing I want to talk about is the Speedpaint Metallics. And I wasn't quite sure what to expect from these, as from the prototypes they sent me, they just seem like in metallic paints. The final production versions, however, are really unique paints, and I really wanted to spotlight them in this video because I really like them. Much like some of the Contrast 2.0 paints, the Speedpaint Metallics have the same consistency of a speed paint, but with a slightly different effect. They flow really nicely and remind me a little bit of Vallejo's metal color range, and are a quick way to get a full coverage metallic coat over a white base coat with very little effort. Depending on how textured the base model is, these paints give some basic shading, but you might want to add a wash on top of these at some point later to get the full range of dark to light on your metallics. Ultimately, I think these Speedpaint Metallics are extremely interesting, and I look forward to testing out all 10 of the new metallic colors over a really textured model with lots of deep crevices. Blending. So now that we know the reactivation is pretty much gone, does this mean we can't really wet blend with these the way that we used to? I've heard mixed results about this, but in my experience, the answer is no, which is a big disappointment for me personally, because that's pretty much how I used to use speed paints. Here you can see I'm attempting to blend two colors together to get a more varied skin tone like I used to do a lot, and you can see here that the speed paint dries so fast that wet blending with these paints doesn't really work the way it used to. It's possible we could add some sort of drying retarder or something to the mix in order to slow down the drying time or the curing time. I know I'm probably one of the only people who feels this way, but I find this to be very disappointing, as the ability to wet blend for a few hours before things fully set was what made Speedpaints stand out for me over comparable brands. However, I also understand that at the end of the day, the Army Painter is a company and they need to service what the majority of their customers want, which is a paint that doesn't reactivate. So, fair enough. The smell. This criticism is a little bit of a sidebar, but I thought it was worth mentioning. And that is that these paints have a much stronger chemical smell than their predecessors. So if you are scent sensitive like I am, I would definitely consider buying a single bottle and checking out how it smells before you invest in the full set. To be clear, this isn't a deal breaker for me. The smell doesn't give me a headache or anything like some chemical smells tend to do, but I did think it was worth mentioning for those of you who are scent sensitive like me. You might also be wondering, can I use these paints like glazes like a lot of comparable brands? And the answer is yes. So if you wanted to, you can still paint miniatures with these using one of my favorite workflows, which is to lay down your base coat of speed paints over a zenithal highlight or even a plain white prime, add any additional highlights using pale sand or a white paint, and then use speed paints as filters to help blend these highlights down into the figure. I think this is a pretty fun and low stakes way to paint, and after that you can leave your model as is, or if you're like me and want some slightly deeper shadows, you can even use something like an oil wash to give your figure an even deeper, more vibrant set of shadows once the speed paints have had at least 2 hours to cure. And you might be surprised to learn that what I'm using in this footage is actually not an oil wash, but another cheap, non-toxic, easy to find art product that seems to work exactly like an oil wash, but that's another topic for another video, so stay tuned as that video will be coming very soon and I'm very excited to tell you about it. As for Speedpaints 2.0, I think they're good. They work perfectly for what they say on the box. It's sad for me personally that the reactivation factor is gone and they don't blend like they used to, but I think for the majority of people, that's going to be a strength, not an issue. Speedpaints are still a cheaper alternative to contrast paints with a larger range of colors, a different consistency and sense of flow, and if you're still curious, I would say buy 1 or 2 bottles or maybe the starter set and test them out for yourself and see if they work for you. I would especially recommend the metallics or maybe some of the new colors like Familiar Pink or Howling Sand. And that's about it for today. I've only had a few weeks to mess around with these, and I'm going to continue to work with them over the next few weeks, and I'll report back with another video hopefully in the future, giving you any further thoughts that I have. Thank you to all of our lovely patrons for supporting the channel. Thank you to Dungeons and Lasers for sponsoring this video, and make sure to go click on their Kickstarter preview page if you haven't yet. And I will see you in the next video.